-10 degrees. A mother and her little girl stand in the snow, hands shaking, holding a cardboard sign. $5 German Shepherd. People walk past, like silence is safer than compassion. No questions, no help. The German Shepherd doesn't bark, he doesn't beg. He stands in front of the child, shielding her, watching every face, waiting for the one who won't turn away. Then a Marine stops, and in the dog's eyes he sees the same wounded loyalty he once knew in war. He doesn't buy the dog, he takes him home. That single night changes everything, because this was never about selling a dog. A family wasn't lost. They were being erased, and the danger was closer than anyone knew. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from, and please like and subscribe for more true heart stories. Winter arrived in Wisconsin without apology. The air burned the lungs, and snow erased sound as completely as it erased footprints. The parking lot outside Northridge Market lay half buried under packed snow, its yellow lines barely visible beneath ice. Wind swept between parked cars, carrying the dry metallic smell of winter, clean, sharp, and unforgiving. People hurried with their heads down, collars raised, breath clouding the air as if even warmth was trying to escape them. Hannah Cole stood near the far edge of the lot where the building's lights barely reached. She was 32, though exhaustion had added years to her face. Her frame was slim to the point of fragility, shoulders slightly hunched as if she had learned to take up less space in the world. Long chestnut brown hair spilled from beneath a worn knit hat, tangled and dull from weeks without proper care. Her skin was pale, stretched tight over high cheekbones, cracked at the knuckles from cold and detergent. Hannah's eyes were hazel large and watchful, the kind that never fully relaxed, not because she was afraid, but because she had learned that stillness invited danger. Beside her stood her daughter. Mia Cole was 8 years old, small for her age, wrapped in a puffy red jacket that had once belonged to someone else. The sleeves were too long, swallowing her hands, unless she curled her fingers into fists. Strands of dark blonde hair escaped from beneath her hood, brushing cheeks flushed raw by the cold. Her face still held the softness of childhood, but her eyes did not. They were gray-blue, observant, cautious, already practiced at reading adults for warning signs. Mia held a piece of cardboard with both hands gripping it as if it might blow away. Written in thick black marker were 3 simple elements: $5, German Shepherd. Between Hannah and Mia stood the dog. Axel was a full-grown German Shepherd, estimated to be 5 or 6 years old. His coat a deep sable black, with tan markings along his legs and chest. Snow clung to his fur, melting slowly against the warmth of his body. His ears were upright, alert, and constantly turning, tracking every movement around them. Axel's body was positioned slightly in front of Mia, broad shoulders angled outward, forming a living barrier. Though his muscles trembled from the cold, his stance remained deliberate and controlled, protective without aggression. Axel did not bark. He did not whine or pull against an invisible leash. His dark amber eyes moved from face to face, measuring, waiting. People passed. A man in a business coat glanced down, frowned, and walked faster. A woman tugged her child closer and avoided eye contact. Someone slowed just long enough to read the sign, then shook their head and muttered something about scams. No one asked why. No one asked how long they had been standing there. Hannah felt each dismissal like a quiet blow. She told herself to focus on Mia's breathing, on keeping her daughter's hands warm, on not thinking too far ahead. Thinking too far ahead led to panic, and panic made mistakes. Mistakes were expensive. Across the lot, the cafe door opened, releasing a brief wave of warmth and the smell of coffee. Ryan Holt stepped outside. He was 35 tall and solidly built, his body shaped by years of military discipline rather than gym vanity. His shoulders were broad beneath a dark winter jacket, his posture straight but not rigid. A short, neatly trimmed beard lined his strong jaw, already flecked with ice crystals. His hair was dark cropped, close at the sides, practical and unremarkable. His face carried sharp angles, cheekbones, cut clean eyes, set deep beneath a furrowed brow, but there was a quiet weariness there too. Ryan had been a Marine for 12 years. Combat had taught him control, but loss had taught him distance. Since leaving the service 6 months earlier, he moved through civilian life carefully, like someone unsure of where the ground might give way. He spoke little, observed much, and trusted his instincts more than explanations. As he zipped his jacket, his eyes caught on something that disrupted the rhythm of the lot. Not the sign. The dog. Axel's stance triggered a memory. Ryan didn't need words for the angle of the body, the deliberate stillness, the way protection came without noise. Ryan slowed, boots crunching against ice, and found himself standing 10 feet away before he consciously decided to stop. Mia noticed him first. Her grip tightened on the cardboard. Axel shifted subtly, weight, adjusting eyes locking onto Ryan without hostility, only assessment. Hannah followed her daughter's gaze and felt her chest tighten. The man looked strong, capable. Those qualities could mean safety, or they could mean the opposite. Ryan raised his hands slightly, palms open, a habit ingrained long before this moment. "How long have you been out here?" he asked gently. Hannah hesitated. Words felt dangerous. Answers created openings. She studied his face, searching for impatience, judgment, pity, anything that might signal a threat. She found none, only focus. "Since morning," she said, finally. Her voice was soft, but steady. Ryan glanced at Mia's shaking hands, then at Axel's fur, stiff with ice. He reached into his pocket, felt the folded bills there, then stopped himself. Money was the obvious answer. Obvious answers were rarely the right ones. Instead, he crouched slightly, lowering his height. "He's a good dog," Ryan said, directing the words to Axel as much as to Hannah. "Protective." Axel did not move. He did not retreat either. Hannah swallowed. "He's all we have." Ryan nodded once, understanding more than she had said. "I'm not here to buy him," he said, "but I've got a warm place, just for the night. He gets out of this cold. Tomorrow you decide what happens next." Silence stretched between them, fragile as glass. Hannah's mind raced. Every instinct screamed caution. Offers came with strings. Kindness always had a price, even when people pretended it didn't. But Mia's lips were turning pale, and Axel's shivering had grown harder to hide. Hannah looked down at her daughter. Mia looked back, eyes wide, but trusting in the way only children could be when they had already learned too much. She nodded once, barely perceptible. "All right," Hannah said. Her voice cracked despite her effort. "Just the dog." Ryan exhaled slowly, as if he had been holding his breath without realizing it. "I'll be back," he said. 5 minutes. As Ryan turned toward his truck, Mia stepped forward quickly. Her movements were small, careful, practiced. She tugged lightly at the hem of his jacket. Ryan looked down. Mia pressed something into his pocket with cold fingers, her voice barely louder than the wind. "If you help," she whispered, eyes flicking toward the dark corners of the lot, "they won't forgive you." Ryan felt the paper before he saw it. He straightened, heart tightening, and nodded once, slow, deliberate. "I hear you," he said. Then he walked away, leaving Hannah staring after him with a mixture of hope and fear that felt almost the same. Axel watched Ryan's retreating figure until it disappeared between rows of snow-covered cars, his ears never lowering. His body still positioned firmly between a mother, a child, and a world that had already looked away. Ryan's rental house stood at the edge of a frozen tree line, a low rectangular building half hidden by snowdrifts and tall pines. The forest behind it was dense and quiet, branches sagging under the weight of ice swallowing sound until even the wind felt distant. It was the kind of place chosen by someone who preferred isolation, not loneliness, but control. Axel stepped inside first. The German Shepherd crossed the threshold, with deliberate restraint paws landing softly on the worn wooden floor. He did not rush forward. He did not explore. Instead, he stopped just inside the door and stood still. Body angled slightly sideways, head lifted. His ears rotated slowly, tracking the subtle sounds of the unfamiliar space. The ticking radiator, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the distant creak of wood settling in the cold. Ryan closed the door behind them and locked it out of habit. "Warm enough," he said quietly. Axel did not look at him. The dog moved only enough to place himself between the door and the interior of the house. His posture was controlled, disciplined. His coat, thick and dark, was dusted with melting snow droplets, forming along the guard hairs. Beneath the cold tremor in his muscles was something else intent. Awareness. Ryan recognized it immediately. He set a bowl of food on the kitchen floor. Axel glanced at it once, then returned his attention to the door. Ryan waited. 5 minutes passed. 10. The food remained untouched. "You're not hungry," Ryan murmured. "You're waiting." Axel did not sit. He remained standing, as if rest itself were a risk. That night, Ryan slept poorly. He woke once to the sound of the wind scraping against the siding. Another time, he woke without knowing why, heart already racing the residue of a dream he couldn't remember clinging to his chest. Each time Axel was still there, awake, unmoving eyes fixed on the dark glass of the door. When dawn came, thin and colorless, Axel had not slept. Ryan drove back to the supermarket parking lot just after sunrise. The storm had passed, leaving behind a brittle cold that sharpened every breath. Snow covered the ground in a smooth, deceptive layer, hiding the mess of yesterday. Too clean. He parked where he had stood before and stepped out slowly, scanning the lot. The space near the far edge, where Hannah and Mia had waited, was empty. Ryan walked closer. The sign was gone. In its place were faint impressions in the snow, smaller boot prints overlapping larger ones, hurried and uneven. Near the curb lay a single mitten, child-sized blue, with a frayed seam, stiff with ice. Ryan crouched and picked it up. For a moment, he stayed there, fingers closing around the fabric, his breath steady but shallow. This was not disappearance. This was removal. Inside the store, early shoppers moved with practiced indifference. Ryan approached a man stacking carts near the entrance. He was middle-aged, stocky, with a thick mustache and tired eyes. "There was a woman and a kid here yesterday," Ryan said. "Selling a dog." The man barely looked up. "Yeah, they don't last. Where did they go?" A shrug. "Not my problem." At the customer service desk, a woman in her 40s, with short, tightly pulled hair, glanced at Ryan, and immediately looked past him. "She causes trouble," she said, before he could finish his question. "Always arguing. People complained." "What kind of trouble?" Ryan asked. The woman pressed her lips together. "You should let it go." Outside, Axel stood rigid beside the truck, eyes locked on the road, as if tracking something long gone. When Ryan opened the door, the dog climbed in without hesitation, but did not lie down. Ryan's phone vibrated in his pocket. "Unknown number, bring the dog back. Forget what you saw." The message was plain, efficient, written by someone used to being obeyed. Ryan stared at the screen. Axel reacted instantly. A low growl rose from his chest, deep and controlled, vibrating through the cab. His ears snapped forward, body-stiffening gaze fixed on the windshield, as if the threat stood just beyond it. This was not fear. This was recognition. "Hey," Ryan said quietly. "Easy." Axel did not escalate, but he did not relax. Ryan felt a slow, cold understanding settle in his gut. This wasn't about a dog. He slid the phone back into his pocket and started the engine. Axel's growl faded, replaced by a taut silence, every muscle still engaged. Snow crunched beneath the tires as they pulled away, leaving behind an empty parking lot, a lost mitten, and a warning that had arrived too early to ignore. Snow fell lightly as Ryan drove toward the older part of town, where buildings leaned into one another like tired men sharing a secret. He kept both hands on the wheel, posture, steady eyes scanning out of habit. Axel sat upright in the passenger seat, head level with the window ears shifting at every sound. The German Shepherd's coat had dried and fluffed, overnight dark sable, catching the gray light, but the tension in his body hadn't eased. Ryan didn't go to the police first. He went to the church. The building stood at the end of Maple Street brick, darkened by decades of winter. Inside, warmth pooled low and slow, smelling of coffee wax and old paper. A woman was arranging scarves on a folding table near the entrance. She was tall and spare, early 50s, with tightly braided black hair streaked with silver, pulled back from a long, thoughtful face. Her skin was deep brown, lined softly at the eyes, and her posture carried a calm authority that didn't need to announce itself. She looked up as Ryan entered. "I'm Pastor Elaine Brooks," she said. Her voice was even practiced at listening. "Can I help you?" Ryan explained briefly. He kept details spare, the way he had learned to do when the wrong detail could close a door. Elaine listened, without interrupting, hands folded loosely at her waist. When he mentioned Hannah Cole's name, her eyes shifted not away but inward, as if checking a memory she had hoped to forget. "Hannah came here a few times," Elaine said. "She never stayed long." "Why?" Ryan asked. Elaine hesitated. "Because she didn't want to be seen staying." Elaine described Hannah as quiet but alert, a woman who stood with her shoulders slightly forward, always watching the door. She worked temporary shifts when she could, mostly at a warehouse on the south edge of town. "Loading inventory," Elaine said. "Hard work. Paid in cash sometimes." "Who owned it?" Ryan asked. Elaine's mouth tightened. "Marcus Dale." The name landed with weight. Marcus Dale was known in town the way weather was known, unavoidable, discussed in low tones. He was in his mid-40s, broad through the shoulders, with a habitually clean shave that emphasized the hard planes of his face. His hair was dark, worn short and neat, and his eyes were pale, calculating. He owned several properties, warehouses, and low-cost rentals. People said he was generous when it suited him. They also said he remembered favors. Elaine lowered her voice. Hannah came to me after he asked her to sign something. A loan, he said, help with rent. She didn't understand the paperwork. When she pushed back, her hours disappeared. Ryan felt a familiar tightening in his chest. He nodded once. Outside, Axel shifted, letting out a single low huff. Not a bark, not a growl. A reminder. Ryan thanked Elaine and left. He drove to the warehouse next to a long concrete structure, crouched beside the railroad tracks. The lot was half empty. A man leaned against a loading dock smoking. He was late 30s, thin, with a scraggly beard and a nervous habit of tapping his foot. Ryan asked about Hannah. The man shook his head quickly. She quit. When couple weeks back. Why another shake? Don't know. Don't want to. That was the pattern. Ryan tried the police after that. The station smelled of disinfectant and burnt coffee. A young officer with sandy hair and a clean uniform sat behind the desk, posture stiff with newness. He typed Hannah's name into the system browse knitting. She left town, the officer said. Voluntarily. Ryan leaned forward. On what basis? The officer hesitated, then turned the screen slightly. The report was thin. No address update, no witness statements. Just a box checked and a line typed. Self-departure. Ryan straightened. He thanked the officer and walked out before frustration could show. By afternoon, his phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a message. It was social media. A post had begun circulating in local groups, grainy photos taken from a distance. Ryan standing in the parking lot. Axel beside him. The caption read, "Man takes dog from homeless child. Claims he's helping." Comments followed quickly. Some angry, some smug, many certain. Ryan stared at the screen, jaw set. This was noise. Designed noise. Axel reacted to Ryan's stillness before the anger had time to surface. He leaned slightly closer, shoulder pressing against Ryan's thigh. The dog's eyes were steady, not alarmed anchoring. Yeah, Ryan murmured. I see it too. Someone wanted the story loud and wrong. By evening, Ryan sat at his kitchen table, papers spread in front of him, notes, names, times. Axel lay at his feet, head up, ears relaxed, but attentive. The house was quiet, except for the ticking clock. Ryan understood now. Hannah hadn't vanished. She'd been erased. And the people who knew the truth had learned that silence was safer than honesty. The old warehouse sat behind the apartment complex like an afterthought, its concrete walls stained by decades of winter runoff. Snow gathered unevenly along the loading docks, pressed flat where vehicles had passed and untouched where no one bothered to walk. Ryan parked a block away and cut the engine, listening. Axel was already alert. The German Shepherd lowered his head and pulled slightly on the leash, not with excitement, but with purpose. His gait changed slower, deliberate. Each step placed as if memory were guiding him rather than scent alone. His ears tipped forward, then flattened briefly, catching something Ryan couldn't hear. They moved along the back fence of the complex, past dumpsters rimed with ice and a row of boarded windows. The air smelled faintly of oil and rust. Axel stopped. He stood rigid before a metal service door set low into the warehouse wall. The door was gray-scuffed and locked from the outside with a heavy industrial padlock. Axel's body went still, muscles tightening along his shoulders. He leaned forward, nose inches from the seam ears, angled flat against the metal. Ryan watched closely. Axel wasn't barking. He wasn't scratching. He wasn't trying to force entry. He was listening. Ryan crouched and pressed his palm to the door. The steel was cold enough to sting. He leaned closer, holding his breath. At first there was nothing, just the wind moving through gaps in the building. Then, faint and irregular, came a sound so small it could be mistaken for settling pipes. Breathing. Ryan straightened slowly, pulse steady but heavy. He scanned the area. Above the door, a security camera was mounted under the eave, or what should have been a camera. The lens was covered with a strip of black tape, edges rough, hastily applied. Beneath it, fresh boot prints crossed the snow, large, recent, the tread still sharp. "Good boy," Ryan murmured, barely audible. Axel did not relax. Footsteps crunched behind them. Ryan turned just as a pickup truck rolled into the alley, tires grinding against ice. It was an older model, dark blue, with rust creeping along the wheel wells. The engine idled low and aggressive. The driver leaned out the window. The man was thick-set, mid-40s, with a square face and a beard trimmed too precisely to be casual. His hair was hidden beneath a knit cap pulled low. His eyes were narrow and assessing, the kind that measured risk before courtesy. "You lost?" the man asked. Axel stepped forward half a pace, placing himself between Ryan and the truck. His tail was low still, his gaze locked onto the driver without blinking. Ryan kept his voice calm. "Just taking a walk." The man's eyes flicked to the dog, then back to Ryan. "Not a good area for that." "Seems fine to me," Ryan replied. A pause. The man smiled without warmth. "Move along," he said. Ryan did. He didn't look back until the sound of the engine faded. Axel stayed tense for a full minute afterward, head turned toward the warehouse until Ryan touched his shoulder lightly. Only then did the dog step away, though his ears remained angled back toward the door as they left. That night, snow fell harder. Ryan sat at his kitchen table, boots still on jacket hanging from the chair. Axel lay at his feet, not sleeping, his head-lifted eyes following every shadow cast by the porch light. Ryan replayed the scene again and again, the covered camera, the padlock, the breath. His phone buzzed just after 9. Not a message, an official notice. The paper had been slipped under his door while he was out, edges damp from snow. The header bore the county seal. Notice of dangerous animal complaint. The language was cold and precise. An allegation of aggressive behavior. A report filed by an unnamed party. A requirement that Axel be surrendered within 48 hours, pending evaluation. Ryan read it twice. Axel rose silently and moved closer, placing his head against Ryan's knee. The dog's breathing was steady grounding. Ryan felt something tighten behind his ribs, not panic, but recognition. "They're closing doors," he said quietly. Axel's ears flicked. Ryan stood and walked to the window. Across the street, the dark outline of a vehicle sat longer than it should have, then pulled away without headlights. Ryan folded the notice and set it on the table, aligning it carefully with the edge. The choice was narrowing. If he left town, the noise would follow him. If he stayed, they would take Axel. Without Axel, the warehouse door would remain closed. Whatever was behind it would stay unheard. Ryan knelt and rested his forehead briefly against the dog's broad skull. Axel did not move. He held steady present, as if lending weight where Ryan needed it. Outside, the wind rose, carrying snow in sharp horizontal lines. Ryan knew now that walking away would not end this. It would only make it quieter. The town hall was already crowded when Ryan arrived, coats dripping slush onto the tiled floor, boots squeaking as people shifted for warmth. Outside, snow blew sideways in dense sheets, the storm pressing against the windows like a living thing. Inside, the air was thick with breath and impatience. Axel stayed close at Ryan's left leg, leash loose but present. The German Shepherd's coat was brushed clean, his posture composed, though his ears kept turning toward every raised voice. He sensed agitation, the way others sensed weather. At the front of the room, Marcus Dale stood beside a folding table decorated with a banner for winter relief donations. He wore a tailored charcoal coat and leather gloves he never removed. His shoulders were broad, his stance relaxed in the practiced way of men accustomed to being believed. His clean-shaven jaw caught the fluorescent light emphasizing the angles of his face. When he smiled, it was measured, controlled warmth, never reaching his pale eyes. Marcus spoke softly at first, thanking the community for braving the storm. He mentioned food drives, heating vouchers doing our part. Then, without naming names, he shifted. "There's been some instability lately," he said. A former serviceman stirring conflict, taking advantage of sympathy. Murmurs rippled through the room. Ryan felt the turn before it happened. Eyes slid toward him, some with curiosity, some with irritation, a few with disappointment already formed. Marcus continued, "We all respect our veterans, but respect doesn't excuse recklessness, especially when children are involved." Someone muttered, "That's him." Ryan stood still. He had learned long ago that reacting too fast fed the wrong story. A woman near the back crossed her arms. She was in her early 30s, slim with blonde hair pulled into a tight ponytail and skin reddened by the cold. Her name tag from the grocery store still clung to her coat. She shook her head openly, lips tight. "He stole that kid's dog," she said. Others nodded. Axel's body tensed. Not aggressive alert. Ryan felt it through the leash, the coiled readiness of a dog who understood threat, even when words disguised it. Ryan raised his voice just enough to be heard. "I didn't steal anything." The room buzzed louder. Marcus lifted a hand gently, as if calming a skittish animal. "Let's all stay reasonable," he said. "Authorities are handling it." That word, authorities, landed hard. Ryan glanced at Axel. The dog met his eyes, steady and grounding, as if reminding him to breathe. The meeting dissolved into noise after that. Accusations, half-truths, a story taking shape without him. Ryan stepped outside into the storm. The cold hit him like a slap. Snow stung his face as he walked toward his truck, heart pounding not from fear, but from urgency. He was pulling the door open when his phone vibrated. An audio file, no name, no explanation. Ryan hesitated only long enough to brace himself, then pressed play. At first there was static, a shuffling sound. Then, thin breaking through the noise, came a child's voice, crying. "Mama," the voice said, breath hitching. "It's dark." Ryan's grip tightened around the phone. A muffled adult voice answered, too low to make out words. Then the child again, clearer, now fear cutting through the distortion. "I want Axel." Axel reacted instantly. The German Shepherd lunged forward, muscles exploding into motion, a raw sound tearing from his throat. It wasn't a bark, it was recognition. A cry pulled from memory. "Easy," Ryan said sharply, though his own hands were shaking. The recording cut off. Ryan didn't think. He moved. Snow swallowed the road as the truck fishtailed onto the highway. Axel braced himself, claws digging into the floor mat, eyes locked forward. The storm erased landmarks, but Ryan didn't need them. He followed instinct memory, the map he had built, piece by piece. They reached the warehouse district as darkness thickened. The building loomed through the snow like a crouched animal, lights off edges blurred. Ryan parked out of sight and cut the engine. Axel was already pulling. They moved on foot, the wind howling loud enough to mask their approach. The back lot was empty. The service door waited where it always had, metal scarred, locked. Axel stopped short. He pressed his nose to the seam and froze, ears, flattening body rigid. His breath came fast, then steadied. He whined once, low and urgent. Ryan leaned in, heart hammering. "Mia," he called, barely louder than the wind. Nothing. Then, faint but unmistakable, came a small voice from the other side of the steel. "Axel." The sound broke something open in Ryan's chest. Axel surged forward, placing his full weight against the door, a desperate bark echoing into the storm. Ryan grabbed the handle and shook it hard. The padlock held. Snow plastered his jacket as he braced himself, ear to the metal, listening to the terrified breathing beyond it, knowing the town behind him had already decided who the villain was. The wind had sharpened into knives by the time Ryan stepped back from the steel door. Snow flew sideways, erasing edges, flattening sound. Axel pressed his chest to the metal again, not clawing, not barking, listening, anchoring himself where the voice had been. Ryan forced his breathing to slow. Panic would cost time. Time would cost lives. He moved 20 yards down the alley, shielding his phone from the snow, and made the call he had been avoiding until he had no other choice. The reporter answered on the second ring. Evan Price had grown up in town and never quite left. He was late 30s, tall and lean, with a habitually furrowed brow and ink-stained fingers from carrying a notebook everywhere. His hair was dark and perpetually untidy. His beard trimmed short in a way that suggested he cared more about clarity than appearance. Evan had covered zoning meetings, floods, and school board scandals. He also had a quiet stubbornness that came from having once printed a truth the town didn't want to read. Evan Ryan said, voice clipped, "I have proof, audio, a location, a child." There was a pause, short, decisive. "Send everything." Ryan did. The recording, photos of the taped camera, the time-stamped shots of the padlock. Evan listened, then asked one question. "Are you there now?" "Yes." "Stay put. I'm calling it in." While Evan worked his side, Ryan made the second call to emergency services, speaking carefully, precisely. He didn't accuse. He described. A locked service door, sounds consistent with a child in distress, weather conditions, imminent risk. Minutes stretched. Axel shifted his weight, eyes never leaving the seam. Snow crusted along his muzzle. When Ryan knelt, Axel leaned into him, steady and solid, a reminder that the present moment still existed. Headlights appeared at the end of the alley, then another set. A rescue truck slid into view, lights muted by the storm. Two figures climbed out, moving with practiced efficiency. The woman in front was Captain Laura Kim, early 40s, compact and athletic, with dark hair pulled into a tight braid beneath her helmet. Her face was square-jawed and focused eyes sharp behind clear goggles. She spoke with an economy born of years making decisions when seconds mattered. "You the caller?" she asked. Ryan nodded and stepped aside. Axel stayed planted, gaze locked on the door. Laura listened to the door herself, palm flat against the steel. She didn't hesitate. Cut it. A firefighter, broad-shouldered, red-bearded name patch reading Harris set the saw to the lock. Sparks leapt and vanished into the snow. The padlock fell with a dull clang. The door swung inward on protesting hinges. Cold rushed out, stale, heavy-laced, with damp concrete and fear. Mia Ryan called, keeping his voice low. A small shape moved in the dark. Then another. Hannah was seated against the wall, knees drawn tight. Her skin gray with exhaustion, lips cracked. Her hair hung in matted strands around a face too thin to hide what she'd endured. She tried to stand and failed. Mia was on her feet. She ran 3 steps and stopped short, eyes wide. Then Axel slipped past Ryan and knelt himself before her, lowering his head, pressing his shoulder gently against her legs. He did not jump. He did not lick. He became a wall. Mia folded into him, sobbing into his fur. Ryan felt the tightness in his chest give way to something like breath. Paramedics moved in blankets first, then hands. Laura directed traffic with calm authority, turning the chaos into lanes. Hannah's pulse was weak but steady. She clutched Mia's sleeve as if afraid the world might take her again. Outside, sirens layered the night. Evan arrived, hood pulled low, camera protected beneath his coat. He filmed without intruding, documenting what needed no embellishment. Police lights cut through the snow next. Marcus Dale did not arrive in handcuffs, not yet. But he arrived pale coat, immaculate eyes calculating even as they darted to the cameras. He spoke quickly, confidently, words stacking into explanations. They didn't land. Evidence does that. The taped camera, the padlock, the audio, the statements. The timeline Evan had already begun to assemble neat as a ledger. An officer read Marcus's rights. His mouth tightened. The practiced calm cracked at the edges. Across the lot, an animal control van idled. A man in a county jacket stepped out, clipboard tucked under his arm. He was mid-50s, stooped slightly, with a soft voice and tired eyes. "I'm here about the dog," he said. Ryan turned, jaw set. Axel lifted his head, alert but composed. Evan spoke before Ryan could. He gestured to the cameras, the medics, the child wrapped in blankets. "That complaint was filed to create pressure," he said. "You're looking at the wrong threat." The officer glanced at Axel, at the way the dog stood calm, watchful, protective, without a hint of aggression. The clipboard stayed closed. Dawn crept in thin bands of gray. By morning, the blizzard eased to a hush. Hannah and Mia were moved to warmth and care. Statements were taken, orders were signed. The complaint against Axel was withdrawn before the ink had time to dry. Ryan sat on the tailgate of his truck, hands numb, watching breath fog the air. Axel sat at his feet, posture loose now, ears relaxed. When Mia approached, bundled in a borrowed coat, Axel stood and waited. She wrapped her arms around his neck. Later, when the town gathered again, not to accuse but to listen, Evan's footage played without commentary. Facts did the work. Ryan stayed, not because he wanted to be seen, because walking away had never been an option once the door opened. Sometimes we wait for miracles to arrive like thunder, loud, undeniable, impossible to miss. But most of the time, God works more quietly than that. Sometimes the miracle is a person who chooses not to walk away. Sometimes it is a door that opens on the coldest night. Sometimes it is a loyal animal who refuses to give up on a child when the world already has. In everyday life, faith often looks ordinary. It looks like helping when no one is watching, listening when it would be easier to ignore, standing still when fear tells you to turn back. What began as just $5 became a reminder of this truth. God does not always change the world in a single moment. Sometimes He changes one heart and lets that heart do the rest. If this story moved you, let it be more than a feeling that fades. Share it with someone who might be carrying a quiet winter inside. Leave a comment and tell us where you are watching from, or a moment when kindness found you when you least expected it. And if you believe that no life, human or animal, should ever be left behind, subscribe to the channel and stay with us. May God watch over you and your home. May He give you peace when the nights feel long, strength when the days feel heavy, and the courage to be someone else's miracle. Even when the cost seems small and the choice feels lonely, you are not walking alone.